All right, welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into kind of the fallout from all these tariffs the Trump administration's been throwing around. Especially with how China's reacted to them right away. We've got a whole bunch of sources we've been looking at to put this deep dive together, like news articles, some expert opinions, and some commentaries. We really want to cut through all the noise and give you guys the real picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the main thing we want to look at today is like what are the immediate consequences of all this terror stuff? But more importantly, like what's the strategy behind it? Like what's the end game? We're going to focus mainly on how this affects the US and China, but also like the EU and Russia. We really want to help you guys, the listeners, really understand what's going on here because honestly, it can be kind of confusing with all the different stuff going on out there.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so one thing that's been coming up a lot in the stuff we've been reading is this idea that Trump's been like using tariffs as a weapon, like he's just swinging them around on the world stage. What do you make of that? And like, how are other countries reacting to that kind of aggressive move?
Well, it's interesting because it seems like China's actually using this to their advantage.
Mm,
They're looking at it as a way to respect the king and repel the barbarians. Like it's some kind of leverage they can use
Mm.
to push back. It's not your typical diplomatic move.
they're not just going head to head with the U.S. They're kind of trying to outmaneuver them in a different way.
Exactly. And speaking of diplomacy, we can't ignore what Obama had to say about all this. It's actually like the first time he's really criticized Trump's policies in his second term, and he didn't hold back.
Oh yeah, he was pretty direct about it.
Oh, yeah. He straight up said these tariffs are not good for the United States. He even compared it to his own presidency, saying, the parties that are silent now would never tolerate me if he had tried to do something like this.
That's a pretty big statement to make. And he didn't stop there, right? He called Trump a self-proclaimed king, a pseudo-dictator, the whole nine yards.
Yeah, he's making it clear that this isn't just about economics. It's about Trump's leadership and what it means for democracy in America. It's a whole other layer to this.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the EU for a sec. We saw that 20% tariff on EU goods announced, right? But most of what we've been reading suggests that China's the real target in this tariff war, not the EU. So if that's the case, what's the point of these EU tariffs?
That's a good question. Some people think it's all part of a bigger strategy.
Yeah.
Like Trump's trying to form alliances and make friends with distant countries while attacking neighboring ones.
So like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Right. So in that sense, the EU, and maybe even Russia, could be seen as those distant friends Trump wants to get closer to, even if it means shaking things up with countries closer to home.
So it's all about shifting those global alliances. And speaking of alliances, Netanyahu just visited the U.S., right? Right after these tariffs were announced. I feel like that can't be a coincidence.
Definitely not. He got there on April 6th, met with Trump the next day, and get this, he was the first foreign leader to meet with Trump after all this tariff stuff went down. That timing is super important.
Yeah, it makes you think there's some serious communication happening behind the scenes between the U.S. and some of its allies.
No doubt. There's a lot we could speculate about there, but before we do, we need to talk about how China reacted to all this. They came out swinging, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. First ones to hit back, and they hit back hard.
They did. China basically sees this whole thing as hegemony, disguised as reciprocity. They're saying the U.S. is putting America first at the expense of everyone else, calling it unilateralism, protectionism, the works. They're not happy.
And it wasn't just talk. They took action, right?
Yeah, for sure. They released an official statement called Position of the Chinese Government on Opposing the U.S.'s Abuse of Tariffs. That pretty much sums up their feelings. And on top of that, they filed a lawsuit with the WTO on April 2nd, the same day the U.S. announced the tariffs.
So they're challenging the whole thing, saying it goes against international trade rules. But here's the thing. Other countries haven't exactly jumped on board with China in condemning the U.S. Why not? You'd think there'd be more of a united front.
It's complicated. The thing is, every country has its own interests, right?
Right.
And some people are saying that the U.S., Europe, and even Russia, they all have their own versions of imperialism. They each want to be the big guy on the block, and they're all a little wary of China's growing power.
Right, right. It's like that saying from Mao Zedong, who are our enemies, who are our friends. Figuring out who to trust is a big part of this whole game.
Exactly. So if the U.S. is hard to isolate because of all these messy international relationships, then these tariffs become a new kind of tool for China. It's not about diplomacy anymore. It's about using economic power to fight back.
So how are other countries like the EU, Russia, Japan, India, and all those guys reacting? Are they picking sides or are they playing it safe?
Well, from what we've seen, they're mostly taking a wait-and-see approach. Like they're sitting back, watching how this all plays out, hoping to benefit from it somehow.
Makes sense. You don't want to jump into a fight if you don't have to. But what's the motivation behind that? Why just sit back and watch?
It comes down to money, honestly. Countries are always looking out for their own economic interests, and right now it's unclear who's going to come out on top. But it does make you wonder, if the U.S. can use tariffs as a negotiating tactic, could other countries do the same thing to them? Could we see some new alliances forming, with countries ganging up on the U.S. or even Europe?
Ooh, that's a good point. Now we got to talk about those threats Trump's been making. He said he'd slap even more tariffs on China if they didn't back down. What was it, like 50% more?
Yeah, 50% on top of what they already have. He basically gave them a deadline. Back down by April 8th or face the consequences. He even said he might stop talking to China altogether and start talking to other countries instead. Talk about playing hardball.
So he laid down the law, but how did other countries react to that? Did anyone step up and side with the U.S.?
Not really, no. No one else seemed ready to jump on the tariff bandwagon.
Yeah.
And as of right now, it's all up to Trump. He's the one who has to make the next move. All eyes are on him.
Let's go back to Netanyahu's visit for a second. It seems more and more like it was all about sending a message, right? Like a strategic chess move. What do you think Trump was trying to say?
Well, it could be a few things. It could be a warning to Russia, saying don't try to take advantage of any disagreements between the U.S. and the EU.
Yeah.
It could also be a message to China, saying don't think you can isolate the U.S. that easily.
So it's like a show of force, basically. But what about Netanyahu and Israel? What role are they playing in all of this?
Some people are saying that the U.S. wants to use Israel as an example, like the first country to really get on board with these tariffs against China. The idea is to show other countries that it's possible to use tariffs as a way to eventually get what you want. The thinking is, if you want to reduce tariffs, you got to negotiate, and to negotiate, you need a united front.
So Israel's the poster child for this whole tariff anti-China alliance thing. Interesting. But one thing that struck me is that Russia and Belarus aren't on the U.S. tariff list. Why not? You'd think they'd be right up there with China.
Well, there are a few reasons for that. One is that the U.S. still relies on Russia for a lot of important stuff, like uranium, titanium, aluminum, all those raw materials. Plus, the U.S. and Russia are already kind of in a standoff. Adding tariffs on top of that could make things even worse. And honestly, the U.S. doesn't trade that much with Russia directly compared to China, so it wouldn't really have the same impact.
So it's not worth the trouble, basically.
Pretty much. It wouldn't really help them achieve this whole tariff alliance thing they're going for.
Okay. So our sources are saying that this whole U.S.-China rivalry is changing. It's not just about military power anymore, right?
Right. It's becoming more about economics and finance. And the thing with Trump is he's so unpredictable. One minute he's all about tariffs, the next minute he's backing down. It's hard to tell what his end game is. Some experts think these tariffs could actually hurt the U.S. in the long run, but it's a really complicated situation. And when it comes to military stuff, the U.S. doesn't really have much leverage over China right now anyway.
So these tariffs are a big part of this new kind of global competition. What does that mean for other countries like Israel? They're caught in the middle, aren't they?
Yeah, they have a tough decision to make. Do they side with the U.S. and risk upsetting China, who's a major trading partner? It's a gamble, especially for Israel. They got to figure out if they can even afford to put tariffs on Chinese goods without finding other ways to get those goods. It'll be interesting to see how their trade numbers change in the coming months.
Are there any other countries we should be keeping an eye on? Like, who else is in this awkward position?
Mexico and India are two big ones.
Yeah.
If they decide to put tariffs on China, that'll be a huge deal. And you can bet China will retaliate. It's like that old saying, when the gods fight, the little devils suffer. These countries can't just stay neutral forever. They're going to have to pick a side eventually.
Yeah, the pressure's on. So what about China? What are their strengths in this whole thing? How can they fight back against these tariffs?
Well, the U.S. needs allies to really pressure China, especially countries that are worried about China getting too powerful. But China has a few tricks up its sleeve. They can focus on their own domestic market, and they have a lot of potential for economic growth. They're not like the EU, which is struggling with stuff like Germany's Industry 4.0 plan because of the war in Ukraine. And they're definitely not like Russia, whose economy's a mess. China's strategy could be to basically use the fact that these tariffs are hurting other countries to their advantage, like Focus on providing essential goods, things people really need.
So they can turn this whole thing around and make it work for them.
Clever. We also got to talk about the U.S. national debt. That seems to be a big factor in all of this, right?
Oh, yeah. The U.S. owes a lot of money, and Trump knows that a lot of that debt is coming due soon, which means he might have to print a ton of money to pay it off, and that's never a good sign. Plus, the Senate just passed this budget reconciliation bill, which basically lets Republicans pass laws without needing much support. Some people are saying this is Trump trying to grab more power.
Like he wants to be a king for real.
Kinda, yeah. And that debt, it's going to be a huge problem. It's projected to go up by almost $6 trillion over the next 10 years, and it could even double. That's a ton of pressure on the Trump administration. It might even be why they're pushing so hard with these tariffs, even if it's risky.
Makes sense. So how has China's reaction to these tariffs changed things? They didn't just sit back and take it. They fought back right away. That's a good point. China's strong response has definitely made things harder for the U.S. It's taking them longer to try and get other countries on their side. Plus, Trump's not exactly popular with everyone in the West. So when China fought back so quickly and decisively, it kind of showed everyone else that it's possible to stand up to him.
It's like they're setting an example for everyone who disagrees with Trump, both in the U.S. and around the world. Which brings us back to Obama's criticism. It seems like things are getting pretty heated in the U.S. right now.
Totally. When Obama called Trump a king and a dictator, it was like he was giving the Democrats a weapon to use against him. They can either criticize him if he gives in to China, or they can attack him for the damage the tariffs are causing. Some people are even saying that this could lead to some serious political unrest in the U.S.
Wow, that's a scary thought. Anything else we should be worried about?
Well, there's this concern that, with all the economic uncertainty going on, some powerful Western companies might try to take advantage of the situation, like buy up a bunch of companies and assets while they're cheap, even if it hurts ordinary people. Some are even saying that this could be part of Trump's plan all along, that he and his buddies could make a ton of money from all this chaos.
So basically, everything's a mess, and it's anyone's guess what's going to happen next.
Pretty much. It's a really complex situation with a lot of moving parts. China's pushing back, other countries are trying to figure out where they stand, and there's a lot of tension brewing in the U.S.
All right, so to wrap things up, Trump's been using tariffs like crazy, and it's caused a lot of chaos around the world. China's not backing down, other countries are playing it safe, and things are getting pretty intense in the U.S.
Exactly. It's all a big tangled web.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say what's going to happen next. But that's what makes it so interesting, right?
Absolutely. So for all you listeners out there, we want to leave you with this. What do you think are the biggest surprises waiting for us in the next few months? And how does all this drama on the world stage change how you think about international relations and the global economy? It's a lot to think about, but we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.